Today's Art Talk number 62 is all about innovation. Another survey request actually was for architect Frank Lloyd Wright. So in the United States, architecture was transformed through the work of Wright in really very, very significant and immense ways particularly when he built Falling Water in 1936. So let's have Sarah tell us more.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Sarah.
We are going to focus on Frank Lloyd Wright. So he was an American architect, designer, writer, educator. He actually designed more than 1,000 structures over a creative period of 70 years. And he really believed one of his main philosophies was designing in harmony with humanity and the environment. So it's a philosophy he called organic architecture. He was raised in rural Wisconsin, and he studied civil engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then in Chicago, first with Joseph Lyman Silsbee, and then with Louis Sullivan. And Wright was the pioneer of what came to be called the Prairie School movement of architecture, which is usually marked by horizontal lines, flat roofs, broad overhanging eaves, really an integration with the landscape and solid construction. And so these horizontal lines were thought to evoke and relate to the wide, flat, treeless expanses of America's native prairie landscape. He also created the word Usonia, which was meant to describe the US in general, but specifically his vision for the landscape of the country in regards to city planning and architecture. So Hollyhock House, this is in the East Hollywood neighborhood of Los Angeles and was designed originally as a residence for oil heiress Eileen Barnsdall. The building is now the centerpiece of the city's Barnsdall Art Park. In July 2019, it was actually added to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and this was the first time that a modern American architecture has been added to the UNESCO list. Unusually for Wright with this project, he was not able to personally supervise much of the construction due to his preoccupation with designing a different project at the time. So he left much of the responsibilities to his assistant, Rudolf Schindler, and his son, Lloyd Wright. Beginning in 1974, the city sponsored a series of restorations, but the structure was actually damaged in the 1994 Northridge earthquake in Southern California. But it was again restored and has been open to the public as of June 2005. So as you can kind of see through the pictures, the house is arranged around a central courtyard with one side open to form a kind of theatrical stage. And this design features exterior walls that are tilted back 85 degrees, which helps provide kind of a Mayan appearance, which is sometimes referred to as Mayan revival style. And the hollyhock, which was Eileen Barnsdale's favorite flower, is used as a central theme to the house, with many symmetrical decorations adapting the plant's general appearance. So this may look familiar to a lot of people, and it's quite fitting that we're discussing an art museum in our art talk. But the Guggenheim is an art museum located in the Upper East Side of Manhattan and houses a vast collection of Impressionist, Post-Impressionist, early modern, and contemporary art. The museum was founded in 1937, but it actually moved locations in 1959, and the new space was designed by Wright. So this space was designed in 1959. The cylindrical building is wider at the top than at the bottom, which was conceived as kind of a temple of the spirit. And its unique ramp gallery extends up from the ground level in a long, continuous spiral along the outer edges of the building, and that ends just under the ceiling skylight. And Wright was inspired by ancient ziggurats of Mesopotamia and their steep steps. And this kind of helped him with the metropolitan design, where he had to think more vertically rather than horizontally, which is what he was more used to designing at the time. So AJ mentioned Falling Water. Falling Water is a house it was designed in 1936 in Southwest Pennsylvania's Laurel Highlands, which is about 90 minutes from downtown Pittsburgh. And the house was to be used as a weekend home for Lillian and Edgar Kaufman, who owned a department store in Pittsburgh. And Wright designed the home above and over the waterfall, as you can see, but Kaufman had expected it to be below the falls to kind of give it a view of the Cascades. And it's been said that Kaufman was initially very upset with the change. And this kind of started a long process of butting heads with Kaufman and Wright. And as construction continued on, the project was plagued with many issues. Wright was only occasionally at the building site and again left his assistant in charge to kind of oversee. But Kaufman really wasn't trusting of the design, specifically the use of this reinforced concrete. And so secretly, he took the architecture plans to a group of engineers to have it reviewed. And you can imagine how upset Wright was to hear this. And he actually even threatened to pull the project. But of course, he stayed. And Falling Water is considered to be Wright's tour de force of his organic architecture. We can see the harmony between humanity and nature in this. And all in all, the total cost of building was $155,000, which today is around $2.9 million. And a fun fact is that Lillian Kaufman was a big fan of Diego Rivera's work, another artist we've covered, and he actually visited them at this house. Taliesin West was Wright's winter home and school in Scottsdale, Arizona, from 1937 until his death in 1959 when he was 91 years old. Today, it's the headquarters of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. And Wright and the Taliesin Fellowship, which were kind of his pupils, began to migrate to Arizona each winter in 1935 to escape the harsh Wisconsin winters for Wright's health on his doctor's advice. So in the initial winters in Arizona, Wright and his students lived in tents while they built the first structures, mainly by hand using as much local material as possible. So rocks, stone, and sand. And the design of the buildings complemented the natural Sonoran desert landscape of the site. The structure's walls are made of local desert rocks, stacked within wood forms and filled with concrete, which is colloquially referred to as desert masonry. And natural light also played a major role in the design. In 1985, Wright's remains, so this is obviously after his death, his remains were removed from his grave in Wisconsin by members of the Taliesin Fellowship, cremated and sent to Scottsdale, where they were later interred in the Memorial Garden. And the original gravesite in Wisconsin is still marked with his name, but his remains are at Taliesin West. The Ennis House. The Ennis House was built in 1924 for Charles and Mabel Ennis in Los Feliz, the neighborhood of Los Angeles just south of Griffith Park, if you're familiar. This structure is the fourth and largest of Wright's textile block designs. So they were constructed primarily in interlocking precast concrete blocks, as you can see. And again, you can also see the Mayan revival design of the architecture. So with many buildings in 1994, this one did have some damage occur with the earthquake in 1994, and also record precipitation during the 2004-2005 rainy season. And so the Ennis House Foundation had estimated that it could cost $5 million just to stabilize the building and $15 million for a full restoration. And an emergency grant was actually issued, and the restoration process was eventually completed in 2007. And while the home itself remains closed to the public, many people still go to see the exterior, and it is considered a city, state, and national landmark. And great views, as you can see.
Sure.
So the Johnson Wax headquarters are the main offices of S.C. Johnson, which is located in Racine, Wisconsin. And the building features Wright's interpretation of the streamlined kind of art moderne style that was popular in the 1930s. And so it's in a break with his earlier prairie school structures, The building features many kind of curvilinear forms that required over 200 different curved Cherokee red bricks to create these sweeping curves of the interior and exterior, as you can see. And what I love about this building is his use of the lily pad columns that are located in the great workroom in the bottom right corner, and were also located in the carport. The building was completed in 1939, and even though it was considerably over budget, Johnson was very pleased and commissioned Wright to build the Research Tower in 1950, which is the taller building you can see in the top right corner. The Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church was in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. And it was designed in 1956 and completed in 1961. The church is one of Wright's last works, and the construction was actually completed after his death in 1959. And while Wright's design was inspired by traditional Byzantine forms and the Hagia Sophia Mosque in particular, the church wasn't meant to be just purely a historic tribute. Rather, it was an update and a kind of reinterpretation of the architectural forms very much alive. And an interesting fact is that Wright's wife was raised Greek Orthodox, so she helped consult on what aspects of the church needed to be highlighted. The Marin County Civic Center was designed by Wright, but the initial construction actually didn't start until 1960 after his death. But it was supervised by his protege, Aaron Green. And the center was Wright's largest public project, and it included a whole campus of different buildings. It's kind of similar to the Greek Orthodox Church with the dome ceiling, giving it almost a futuristic look. And his wife actually picked out the bright blue color for the roof, which was a controversial color at the time, but she picked it because the color would age well and soften over time. Finally, we'll end with the Likes House. In 1959, Wright designed a curvilinear two-story single-family house for Norman and Amy Likes in Phoenix's Palm Canyon. And shortly after the architect died, and the house was completed by architect John Rattenbury, who was an apprentice of Wright. And this was Wright's last residential design, and really took inspiration from the curved design from the surrounding mountains. Again, really playing into that organic architecture, the harmony between man and nature. And the house was originally designed with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, but in 1994, the owner at the time recommissioned Rattenbury to renovate the interior, all of which were approved by the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. So just looking back at all of these structures, I mean, it's evident that Wright has played a huge role in modern American architecture and really leaves behind a large and long legacy of his work that people still discuss, visit, and take inspiration from even today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Such an accomplished architect. And I think for me, what's fascinating is so many different styles as well. And each of them he excelled so well at, right?
And so unique.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you've had a chance, or anyone else in LA has had a chance to visit any of his homes in LA, but they're really fascinating. I've visited the Hollyhock and Ennis both many times. The Hollyhock house in itself is quite interesting, particularly around the cement work and you featuring the hollyhock flower, right, as kind of the central theme. Just fascinating. Also, Schindler's has made a lot of who, as you mentioned, worked with Frank Lloyd Wright, but he also has a number of famous homes in Los Angeles, including his Treehouse home, which is in Silver Lake.
Right. Yeah, it's. I've had the chance to see several of his homes, AJ, and particularly when I was working in Milwaukee. The Wauwatosa building is actually quite something to see. But my favorite really is the Guggenheim Museum in New York. I just love the modern look and feel of it. Plus, what's not to like about being in a museum, right? The circular building, the fact that it's wider at the top is unique because most people think of the foundation's got to be, big and broad, and it gets narrow at the top. And this is a complete, flip on that, which causes you to think, and it's, what I would call a temple of the spirit. I feel like I'm, like you're descending, up to heaven when you're standing in the floor. And as you walk up kind of through it's like a stairway to heaven, being a rocker, I guess there's a great analogy.
So Sarah, which ones are your favorites?
I mean, falling water is so, you think about when it was made. I mean, even now that would be such a feat of architecture, and it was
Yeah.
made, so long ago that's really, I mean, it's so remarkable to me.
That's one I'd love
it
to
is.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, built in what, 36, I think, and
Yeah.
today we would view it as a contemporary home, wouldn't we?
Right. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
really timeless.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. Obviously, he's a big fan of many of our associates because we've got a really a lot of great comments in the chat window. So it's great to see that that there's so many fans of Frank Lloyd Wright. And so thank you so much, Sarah, for
Thank
sharing with us. And I mean, he was truly innovative in the field of architecture.
Yes.
Indeed. And in construction design, right?
True. Yeah, though I think from what I've read, a little secret about myself, I at one time thought of myself as becoming an architect, and I actually read up quite extensively on Frank Lloyd Wright. But what I've read, Frank Lloyd Wright did not have a really positive, great relationship with the folks that were in charge of engineering and constructing his designs. Yeah,
right? It's hard to make it work. But it's as you say often, AJ. If you don't take risks, there's no reward, right?
That's true.
So he took a lot of risks in his designs.
Yep, that's true. All right. So, hey, thank you very much, Sarah.